Well, welcome back to the Canadian Ruck, everyone. This is Jamie Gray. In this pod, we feature and we welcome Dr. Robert Strang. Robert was born in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. He played for the UBC Thunderbirds and also the UBC Old Boys Ravens. Capped with Canada came very interesting. He's got one cap. It was back in '83 v England at the hallowed stomping grounds of Twickenham, so that's pretty cool. Second row, and I scoured this when I found this on Facebook. A good little kick out from his boys at the Ravens, and they said this about Dr. Strang: known for always being in the thick of it and ready to sort things out, and that's what you'd want from your second row. Played roughly 20 years, and then he turned to officiating after that. And you're going to know him probably more from his time today, as he is the chief medical officer of the province of Nova Scotia, and he's early in COVID expert. He's doing some great things there. I got a few buddies in Nova Scotia that basically call him a rock star, and they love him. It looks like things in Nova Scotia are going quite well with COVID, but they're also now just come out. They're dealing with that new variant. I'm confident, though, that he and his counterparts are going to get that taken under control pretty quickly. Just a quick plug for us. We do this every week just because we need these stories getting out. So follow us on the Twitter, the Instagram, the Facebook. Twitter is at Canadian Ruck. Instagram's _Canadian_Ruck, and our Facebook's at the Canadian Ruck. And if you need to contact, you want to drop me a note, the email is thecanadianruck@gmail.com. We're on a variety of platforms. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Castbox. Watch, listen, follow, subscribe, and share. Those were the things that I always ask. And lastly, our website is thecanadianruck.weebly.com. I'm going to take a look here at some international rugby news. This one's not necessarily just rugby, but it impacts our rugby teams here in Canada. Reports surfacing out of Japan that Japan might actually opt out of hosting the Olympics this year. Now, the IOC and the Tokyo Olympic Committee have refuted this. However, some areas of the governments are pushing to cancel. According to the Times out of the UK, the Japanese government has privately concluded that the Tokyo Olympics will have to be canceled because of the coronavirus. They're trying to focus now on securing games for the city, and the next available year is 2032, so quite a long ways out. According to a senior member of the ruling coalition, there's an agreement that the games, which were already postponed for a year, are currently doomed. The aim is now to find a face-saving way of announcing the cancellation that leaves open the possibility of Tokyo playing host at a later date. And the source actually stated, no one wants to be the first to say, but the consensus is it's going to be too difficult. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen. It's an unnamed source that the Times used. But in a statement released from the IOC, they refuted the claims. And this is what the IOC had to say. Some news reports circulating today are claiming that the government of Japan has privately concluded that the Tokyo Olympics will have to be canceled because of the coronavirus. This is categorically untrue. At an IOC executive board meeting in July last year, it was agreed that the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Tokyo 2020 will be held on July 23 of this year, and the program and venues for the games were rescheduled accordingly. All parties involved are working together to prepare for a successful games this summer. We'll be implementing all possible countermeasures against COVID-19 and will continue to work closely with the IOC, the Tokyo 2020 Organizing Committee, and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government in our preparations for holding a safe and secure games this summer. All right, so the IOC is adamant that this is happening. The Canadian Olympic Committee has, in reports that I've read, said they have full confidence that the games are going to go ahead in July. Saying that, though, how is Tokyo faring with COVID right now? Well, according to the Japan Times, as of this recording, which is Saturday morning, I don't even know what the date is. It looks like Saturday, the 23rd of January. According to the Times, they've had 10 straight days of over 1,000 new cases in Tokyo. High number of those, according to the Japan Times, is that they have severe conditions. Their hospitals are overwhelmed. The rising cases has growing concerns that the medical system is on the brink of collapse. And there's a notable increase of the number of cases of people dying at home and not even making it to the hospital. Saying all that, the games are 5 months out, 6 months out. Pro sports are happening around the world. The NHL, the NFL, and NBA are happening here in North America. There's pro rugby and pro soccer happening in Europe and other parts of the world. And I think everybody at the end of the day wants to make sure that our athletes and the citizens of Tokyo are safe. But it's 5 months out, 6 months out, and there could definitely be some headway with different vaccinations at that time. So hopefully they don't pull the plug too quick. Hopefully they continue prepping and can make this a go, because we all want to see it, but we also want all our athletes to be safe and healthy. Other news, and this is not really news. This is kind of just some railings. Is some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about now are things that Dr. Strang and I spoke about a little bit, and some things I've read over the last couple months from the 15, the beautiful website there that has some great articles. And I just want to kind of talk about this a little bit before we get to Dr. Strang, because as I said, we do make mention of it a few times through our conversation. Has the pro game taken off too quickly? Are there issues around the health and welfare of players that is driven by corporate dollars, i.e., like the safety and welfare of the players, the lack of downtime they have, the amount of contact and practice, inconsistent schedules at the pro international levels? Some argue that the volunteer game was purer and more entertaining. Are there too many systems in place for players in the game? Is rugby trying to catch up with soccer, or football, or hockey, or other sports that have been professional for decades and centuries? Are they trying to stake that claim? Did Super Rugby get it wrong by not bringing in the Pacific Island teams? Anyway, as I said, Dr. Strange and I discussed some of this, but I just want to give you some opening thoughts here. When the game was amateur, you'd have 2 practices a week and a game. And there's something pure about that. The game used to be about finding space. It used to be about evasion and finding openings. But now it seems it's more often not. It's about winning collisions and big hits. Is there a safety net for players? Players are bigger, they're faster, they train more specifically. And I've read a quote, some collisions are as fierce as car accidents. And in 1977, I know this is old, but it's kind of neat how it's still prevalent. In the 1977 paper written by Ian Duthie Adams, MD, discussing rugby injuries at a hospital in Leeds and at a sports injury clinic nearby, he stated in his article, there's been widespread comment on the apparently increased number of injuries in rugby football, and in particular of the problem of head injury. Rugby football is a collision sport played with enjoyment by many. So rugby has long been talked of in such a way, and if this has not always been so, it is merely because no one had previously thought to invent the category that might separate it from a contact sport like association football. Is rugby slowly morphing into a high collision sport and aspect the same way as the NFL is? I hope not. And don't get me wrong, I love the professionalism of the game. I love the fact that great players get to be paid like other athletes. And there's some amazing to watch. You watch rugby at Super Rugby, the MLR, Top 14, Pro 14, Premiership, new leagues starting in Japan, etc. It is amazing. Players have skills now like you've never seen before. A pinpoint pass from Aaron Smith, a Sonny Bill offload, a precision box kick from Faf de Klerk, Eben Etzebeth jumping in the line, a Chesley Coleman sidestep that you can't contain, a burst of speed down the wing by a DTH, a Bowden Barrett, well, I guess pretty much anything really from Bodie. But you get the point. Skills have evolved tremendously. You've got backs coaches now, you've got scrum coaches, you got front row coaches, you got nutritional coaches, sports and strength coaches, mental skills coaches. Players have access now to so much more expertise, advice, and training than ever before in the history of the game. But maybe some things need to be tweaked. Maybe some things need to make it safer for players. Are there changes that we can have? Are there something that we can do, but still keep it entertaining for not just ardent fans like you and I, but for those casual fans that we're trying to hook? The 15 wrote an interesting article, and these are some of the things that I brought out that I thought these are kind of neat. Do the number of subs, tactical subs, need to be reduced? Reasoning, tired players make for more space. Tired players also mean there's probably going to be more mistakes. And theoretically, it would mean there'd be less wear and tear on fewer players. What about quicken the scrums or stop the clock? Lots of times now it's wasted during the resets. I love a good scrum, but yeah, a scrum can take 2 or 3 minutes nowadays. Maybe start offering free kicks for wasting time of play. My favorite that they listed was lower the tackle height and insist on the full wrap. I've said this one for a number of pods, but I don't really think we need to go into details. That tackle height needs to go down. That seatbelt tackle, those tackles up above the chest, need to come down. They're dangerous. And this one's not on the list, but it's a personal thought I have, and I bring this to my high school union or high school league here annually, and it never happens. But one thing is about the barging drive. When a player has a ball and two or three guys are pushing him from behind, it's not rugby in my opinion, and it just opens things up for injury for the guy carrying the ball and for the guy getting smashed into. At the end of the day, we all want to see rugby played with skill and few injuries. Our nation's unions, pro leagues helping this? I don't know. I digress. I love watching it. I love watching the pro game, but I miss the pureness of the amateur game. I don't know. Maybe there's something in there. Maybe there isn't. Taking a look now at our gray area from last week, results from the last pod. Australia's proposed mini rugby World Cup. Should Canada go? And had a few interesting, I guess, it was actually quite skewed here. On Instagram, 75% want Canada to go, 25% don't. And on Twitter, 73% want it to go, and 27% don't want it to go. So mid 70s want Canada to somehow take part in this, which would be, in my opinion, awesome. Get the boys over there playing some rugby. Now, you looking for some specialized printing? I know the place to go. Look no further than Eastbound Sales on Union Street in St. John, New Brunswick. Family-owned print shop. They've got over 40 years of expertise. They specialize in wide format printing for things such as blueprints, posters, signs, banners, and canvas. They've got a fast turnaround, very competitive pricing. My buddy Coyne runs this shop. He's a great rugby guy, and he's a very professional man in his job. Check them out at eastwardsales.com for more information. Again, that's eastwardsales.com. Coming up now, though, Dr. Robert Strang. Welcome back. The Canadian Ruck is very fortunate. We've got Dr. Robert Strang on, and he's the Chief Medical Officer of Nova Scotia, and he's got his hands full dealing with everything that's going on, but he's been very pleasant and gracious to take some time out of his busy day and meet with us over Zoom. So, Robert, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Jamie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. All right, so let's jump right in here. You're born in Rhodesia, moved to Calgary at a young age. How did you get involved in rugby? Because from my understanding, what I've read about you, it wasn't where you were leaning towards when you were younger.
No, I mean, I guess I grew up with it. My dad was born and raised in the UK. He played rugby. One of my first memories as a kid, very young kid in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, was watching him referee a rugby game, and he as I look back, I first came to Fredericton and then went to Edmonton, Ottawa. Certainly in Fredericton and Edmonton, he was involved in the Fredericton Loyalists and then Edmonton Klansmen, and I remember going to some events. So I certainly knew about rugby. I played basketball all through high school. I did play a bit of rugby. My dad coached us just for a little bit when I was in grade 7 and 7-a-side. Had no idea what any of us were doing. I played a bit in grade 12, but I really got into rugby. I started university at UBC, and I wasn't good enough to play varsity basketball. I knew that wasn't the path, and I was looking for something. And my dad, who was teaching at UBC in forestry, he had coached the year before when I was not at university. He said, "Why don't you try out for rugby?" And I said, "Sure, I'll give it a try." So I went and played in the junior team the first year, and went from there. Loved it.
So you're at UBC. What's the jersey that you're wearing? That's a nice looking jersey.
Oh, this is I'm a lifetime. So the UBC Old Boy Ravens have a strong connect with UBC rugby, and so the jerseys. I'm a lifetime Raven, a member of that club. So after I left UBC, I played for a number of years with the Ravens.
That's awesome. I was on Facebook and I found a quote about you on the UBC site. Said that you were known for always being in the thick of it and ready to sort things out. I love that. It's a good quote for a big, strong forward for sure. Let's talk your first cap. You went it was England at Twickenham of all places in '83. What can you remember? Like, what can you tell us about that? That your first cap. Let's do it in Twickenham.
Well, for the first and only cap, I'm one cap wonder. And that's okay. A couple of things there, 3 memories that I'll talk about. The first, it was a terrible day. It was the Twickenham. It was horizontal rain, absolutely awful day. And there was hardly any crowd. It was Canada versus, Canada. We weren't on the world stage by any means, young schoolboys in the crowd. But even despite all that, being out there wearing the Canada jersey, right? It was, and we lost, but we matched up well. I think we did ourselves proud, and I still remember, Pat Palmer had a try taken away by the referee, who just wasn't sighted to see him touch the ball down. So anyway, it was just to be there, sing "O Canada" and play. And then my other memory is after it. This is old Twickenham. It went, and then the change room, they had these great big bathtubs, and you come out after the game. Our gear were soaked, mud. Strip that off, and you get into the warm bath, and these old guys coming with big trays of pitchers of beer and glasses. You've never been treated with such luxury as a post-game bath or shower before or since.
I'm not sure they do that anymore with the pitchers of beer. I'd hope they do, but I'm not sure if they do.
No, it's all too professional now
That's
for
right.
that stuff.
That's right. So in the 80s and the 90s, I think from what I saw, you hung up your cleats in the early 90s. How did you manage to play rugby for so long while still working towards your medical degree? That seems like it's pretty tedious, pretty tenuous on your time.
Yeah, it was a challenge. I remember in my first year, I went through, did my school, played for UBC. Then I took a couple of years for me back and forth in and out of school. I was trying to get into med school, and I was playing for the Ravens. But then when I got back into school, I went back and played for UBC, but I only played for the Braves, their second division team. Rather than the Birds, the top team, I just didn't have the time. And then I got injured, and I had to have knee surgery at my second year, so I didn't play for a couple of years. And then when I came back, I played my last year of med school, my first year of my family practice residency. I went back and played for the Ravens, and we won the BC champions
Nice.
2 years in a row for those years. With
Nice.
a lot of the guys who were on the stellar '91 World Cup team were on the Ravens team, but. I juggled, and the coach Spence McTavish was understanding of the demands, but I also made it a priority because you can't study and be at school all the time. So I was able to juggle it.
Well, it's nice you get a break, right? You get to go out and be with the guys, and throw yourself out there for 80 and have a couple of pops afterwards, and just kind of unwind from the stressors of school and your practice, I imagine.
Absolutely. You gotta, you have to put some fun into your life, no matter how hard you're working.
Speaking of putting fun in things, Nova Scotia schools last year temporarily removed rugby from their co-curriculars. Rugby Canada couldn't understand it. Most of the country couldn't understand it. What were your thoughts around that? Is that something you can speak of or speak on as the chief medical officer, or what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I was aware of that. I've stayed connected with Rugby Nova Scotia. I was actually brought in as part of a panel, co-chairing a panel on sports safety, which was an outcome of that event. I was also asked for my opinion at the time, and I provided my opinion that it was really a bit of an overreaction, driven by safety and insurance concerns, legitimate concerns, but I think there was a way to work through them without having to take extreme steps. So I was able to provide some of that thinking longer term, and we still haven't got rugby back because of COVID, but hopefully maybe this spring there'll be some high school rugby in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, that would be nice. It was really weird for me last year not coaching at all, and this year with the fear that it might not happen again, it's strange, that's for sure. Robert, what are your thoughts on what Rugby Canada do that can promote rugby better for the country so that we can get more players involved and more, I guess, families understanding that if you do this right, it's as safe as any other contact sport. It's just all about how you do things. What can Rugby Canada do? What should provincial unions do, I guess, even?
So, I'm a bit distant from the game now, but in my opinion, I'm not sure that going professional and Canada having to compete in that professional world, internationally at the top level, has actually helped us at the grassroots. So maybe we have to make a fundamental choice in Canada, and not everybody may like this, but Do we try to be as good as we can, the best, as high as possible at the international stage? Or do we go back and say we're actually going to focus our resources, our time, our energy much more at the grassroots club level? And out of that, maybe long term, if you have more players playing, maybe it's a longer term view. Ultimately, you'll get the better players coming forward, but maybe we're not as highly ranked in the world stage simply because we've chosen to focus elsewhere. So I think if we really invested in, started with mini rugby, tons of kids play mini soccer, lots of Canadian kids play minor hockey. What about if we started playing non-contact, and really, if we had clubs who had some resources who could then work with communities, work with schools, then you can start, you could start a path for young players playing mini rugby for their club, maybe doing it also, the club's also supporting schools, this back and forth. And then as you get into junior high school, you introduce 7-a-side and ultimately 15-a-side.
Yeah.
And then you have a junior player development that I think a lot of kids play in high school, but I think we lose most of them because they don't move on to clubs. Because I think a lot of the clubs struggle. So how do we actually put more resources into the club level and through the club supporting community level rugby starting at young ages? And over time, that will grow the game. And, and maybe it makes a much bigger player base, which ultimately the bigger your player base, you're going to have a bigger pool to select from the elite players.
Yeah, exactly. So there are rookie rugby programs that started, and kind of along the exact same thoughts you're talking about, but it's just, it's not there yet. I agree with you 100%. The clubs need to be more invested. The more kids you can get involved and have their boots on the ground, that can only strengthen Rugby Canada, because as you said, there are way more players that are actually coming up through the system, right? That's why we're usually a great hockey nation, because everybody and their dog starts skating when they're 4 years old. So it kind of carries on, right? So if we did that with rugby, it would be great. Who was when you were playing, and you already talked about your dad a little bit, who had the biggest impact on you as a player, like when you were actually on the pitch and learning the game?
So I think it wasn't so much players. I played alongside of some excellent players, but it's my coaches. I started at UBC with, Don Spence, long-standing, coach at UBC, and his assistant coach, Rod Holloway. Rod was the forward coach, and still well remember the Rod outs we'd have. But Rod is just such a great in terms of player development and working with the players. And then when I went to the Ravens in the last few years I played there, Spence McTavish, long-standing international. And so I think the biggest influences for me were those three coaches. But I'm not going to, but also just in general, all the players, because I played on great teams with wonderful people, and I played rugby for fun. And it was because of all those great people that it remained fun and never became kind of like a chore to do. And that's simply because of the people alongside you.
That's really nice. It's nice when you have those great coaches that make you feel like you want to be there. It gives you that emotion, that positive emotion to come out. What are your thoughts on what makes a great team player? I imagine you played with quite a few. You talked about some that were on the 91 World Cup squad. What about those guys made them great teammates?
Well, I think in general, what makes a great teammate, but especially rugby, it's and this is what I love about rugby. It's the team is before the person, and the great teammates are the ones that show up Tuesday, Thursday practice, show up on Saturday, even if they've just come back from a national team tour or whatever, or they've just come from a hard day work, whatever. The great teammates are the ones that roll up their sleeves and give it their all, no matter what. It's just a practice or it's just a regular, club game on a Saturday. But they're willing, they do what they need to do, and they got your back when you're on the field.
I think from what I read about you in some different areas, that's exactly the type of player you were as well. So would have been nice to see you playing, I think.
Well, I mean, but I think I really prided myself on consistency, right? game to game, no matter I was playing just a regular cup game or the provincial final, playing at the same level, giving it the same effort. And, maybe you don't stand out at any one game, but you're at that same level every time, just steady. And then second row forward, my job was to just be in the thick of things and, get the ball for the glory boys. And, but but again, that to me is what epitomizes rugby. And that's, and I said this in another interview. What I love about rugby, the sport, a couple of, that it is about the team, and it doesn't, so many other sports, it's like, whoever scores the goal or the touchdown or whatever. But rugby, and we've moved away a little bit from professionalism, but it's, somebody scores, it's all 15 who scored, right?
Yeah.
Because it starts with the front row and the scrum, or the locks and the line out, whatever. And so it's the team that comes first. And then once it's done, you shake hands with your opponents and you go have a beer.
Yeah.
And what was on the field is left on the field, and you still, that camaraderie. And I still, I was very fortunate to travel a lot of places with rugby, and I know if I traveled someplace, one of the first things I do is find out where's there a rugby club, and I could instantly go, meet some folks, and then you'd have an instant connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I don't know of any other sport where when the game's over, you can go out for a beer and, how happened on the pitch is done. I don't know if that happens anywhere else. I'd have to really dig deep to try and find another sport where that's like that.
Yeah. And I also think rugby's a great equalizer. It's just everybody's, again, because it's this team, and it's whether you're the one scoring the try or the one digging the ball with your head down the mud, everybody's equal. And I'm sure you've been there, and the locker room's a great equalizer too. If you got a swelled head, it's going to get shrunk down pretty quick with some jabs or whatever.
Absolutely.
But it is that approach that, doesn't matter. We're all on the field together. We're all equal. We're all kind of brothers or sisters in arms. And we look after each other and we work for each other, and it's the result for the team that makes the difference.
100% agree. Speaking of like results on the team and camaraderie and things, were there any life lessons that rugby helped you with or taught you that you can use in your at work at Nova Scotia now? Like, was there anything that rugby taught you in life?
Well, I think it's emphasized just what I was talking about, that, no matter where you're working, the results only happen because of the work of lots and lots of people. And I use that right now because I happen to be kind of like on the front page, or the spokesperson in the public face and voice of the COVID response in Nova Scotia. But there's hundreds and hundreds of people behind me, my team in public health, across government, across the healthcare system. And so it helps me, remind me every day that, and it keeps me on a level ground, that, I'm just there representing hundreds and hundreds of the work of hundreds and hundreds of other people. And we're one big team, and we got to stick together as a team.
A lot of trust there, right?
Yeah. Building trust, knowing that if something's going sideways, and we've had a lot of those in COVID,
Yeah.
the people that you're working with, that, you've got each other's back, and you can trust each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a hallmark of our success in Nova Scotia, that by and large, across the province, we've been able to keep the vast majority of people pulling in the same direction because we've built that trust. And we are, I keep saying it in a lot of places, we are one team. And so I think the lessons from rugby about that, you don't elevate yourself, you just put your head down and do your work and support your teammates, knowing that if you do that, that's when you get the good result.
Yeah. I've got a fair number of friends in Nova Scotia, and they sing your praises every time. When I talk to them and said, you're going to come on my podcast, they were really excited. And basically, like, you're like a rock star there is what they were telling me. So it was pretty cool. So it's 2021. You talked about that Ravens team back in '91 when you won the championship. 30 years out. Just say there's no COVID. You do this team reunion. Everybody's getting back together. What do you think, or what would you want those ex-teammates of yours to be saying about Robert the player, Robert the teammate?
Hopefully they would say that I was a good guy, that they could rely on me on the field, right? That one of the best things that's ever been said to me. It was actually after it was on the '93 England tour. Gary Duclos, who I respected as a more senior player, he was the prop I was pushing behind. And after the game, he said, "Good job, you gave me good push." I mean, that it's that kind of stuff that you recognize you did your part, and other people could rely on you, right? Game in, game out.
And it goes back to what you said about, even though one person scores a try, there's 14 other people out there. If you weren't pushing properly, that scrum's collapsing. So that's the team aspect of it right there that you just highlighted. That's really nice. Let's look at. I get a couple of questions left here. I know you're busy, and it's pushing the time limit here. There's a pending lawsuit in the UK for all the head knocks. As a medical professional, what's your opinion there? Like, is rugby union in a world of hurt right now because of this, or where do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I mean, and I was involved in after I stopped playing, for a few years I was involved in the medical side as well as refereeing. So I'm aware of some of it. I kind of lost touch. I think rugby needs to take it very seriously. There are a lot of implications from that could fall out from the lawsuit. That if it's not dealt with seriously and a lot of thinking, it could essentially destroy the game to a large extent if you take the physicality out of it. So rugby needs to say, well, how can we continue with the essence of rugby but keeping it safer? And part of that for me is it's the risk has increased and elevated. If you look at the most recent coverage, it's about after the professional game. And to me, it's got something to do with the frequency of play. Now they're professional. Everybody's way bigger. I mean, you look at a modern game now, the backs are bigger than the forwards than when I played. Mm-hmm. And also the way the game's gone. And I'll make this comment. People may not like it. I'm not a big fan of the modern game. It's like rugby league, way too static. I love rugby because the best part was when you could run with the ball in hand and get out. So I think that increased size, the physicality of the game, the intensity because it's professional, and the frequency because now they're professional athletes. So there's something there for me about, and I do think we've lost some of the core, the roots of rugby through professionalism. So maybe out of this, we can maybe actually get back to more of the essence of rugby, of what we talked about earlier, at a community, at a club level. Where it's something special in the community, and if we get there, then maybe there's some good that comes out of this as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's even just the frequency of contact in practices for professional players that adds up. That adds up tremendously throughout the course of a year. Where when you were playing, when I was playing, it was a Tuesday, Thursday, and probably Thursday was contact, but Tuesday wasn't. But now it's almost a daily thing for those guys hitting the scrum machines, right?
Yeah, and coming back to your question earlier about I mean, the real risk for me is that because of the concern around head injury, etc., parents just take their kids away and will have nothing to do with rugby. Yeah. That's why I think we got to grow the game, even if it's more focused on for younger ages on touch or no tackle, all those models, or even the 7-a-side game until kids are like 14, 15, and then they're more mature, and then we can teach them how to tackle and stuff properly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the earlier start at the safer it can be for those kids growing up. You spoke about COVID a little bit, and I know you talk about it all the time, so I don't really want to get into the COVID issue, but your role right now, it's more intimidating than facing rugby players, I imagine. What have you been doing to keep your mental health in shape? I mean, you're going 7 days a week, probably since this started. What are you doing to look after yourself, your family, along with the entire province of Nova Scotia? How are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah, probably not doing a great job on that, right? It's hard because I'm 7 days a week with at least a portion of every day, and if I'm not directly working on it, there's something I'm thinking about. But I think I'm able to a large extent when I'm fortunate. I have a mindset that once I'm done with it, I can compartmentalize it, put it away, not worry, not stress about it, and then come back to it. And when I'm at home, it's being a dad, being a husband, focusing on those things, and I get, and I get a lot of reach out from, I'm in a church community, a lot of people there are supporting our family. I get people from all over Nova Scotia emailing me, sending me cards, a bunch of stuff. And all of that is really, really strengthening, right? It gives you that, energy and kind of commitment to go, okay, the next day, because you know that you're positively impacting people, and as I talked about earlier, you're bringing people along to deal with this significant challenge that we have. So all of that is helpful, but yeah, it's been wearing on me. I got probably too many COVID pounds that I need to think about at some point, and the stress is builds up at times, but.
They talk about the freshman 15 in university. I think it was the COVID 30 for me this year. So
yeah.
My joints aren't feeling very good. I got to do something. Listen, Robert, I've had a great time chatting with you. I really appreciate it. I know your time is precious right now, so thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Best luck looking after yourself in Nova Scotia during COVID, and maybe we'll chat again sometime.
Thanks, Jamie, for the opportunity. Shout out to all my Ravens teammates, UBC teammates, and reg me on.
Cheers, Ben. Dr. Strang, thanks very much. That was an absolute pleasure. I know you're extremely busy man, so I really appreciate you chatting with us. I think we talked for about 35 minutes in total. We had about 25 to 30 minutes up for a pod. But keep doing the great things you're doing. Nova Scotia loves you. You're a rock star in your province. And it was a lot of fun talking rugby with you. It's one of my passions is chatting rugby, and it's great to chat with anybody that has experience like you do internationally, at the club level, and officiating like you've kind of run the whole gamut there. So thank you very much. Best of luck continuing the fight with COVID for Nova Scotia and Canada, keep being a leader of the Maritimes and of our country. Coming up next, our next pod is going to feature Derek Daypuck, followed by Maria Gallo, then Kelly McCollum and Leslie McKenzie. We're going to have Evan Olmsted on soon, as well as Nick Blevins, Stephanie White, and Hans DeGoody also as well. Sophie DeGoody's parents are going to join for a joint pod, which will be a lot of fun. And as always, we've got a host of others lined up for conversations. So as always, just want to say thank you, everybody, for listening. And I encourage you again, spread the rugby word, get the message out of all these great athletes and these great stories that we hear. It's very appreciative by those athletes, by those players, by those rugby aficionados when we pass these words around, because as Canadians and as rugby players, we don't like to toot our own horn, so maybe we can toot the horn for others by passing these notes around. Again, I got to say thanks to my son Rylan for supplying us with their music, and as always, feel free to request topics, request guests, request questions for future pods. Always look forward to hearing that stuff. And then lastly, and just want to make sure everybody knows that I want you to stay safe. I want you to stay healthy. And I want you to stay sane. But most importantly, keep on rocking.